Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are absolutely refusing to wade in the shallow end. We're not doing Introduction to SAP 101.
No, definitely not.
We aren't doing how to log in and change your password. We are, I think, putting on the heavy industrial-grade diving gear and sinking straight to the bottom of the ocean.
We certainly are. We are looking at the engine room of global commerce today.
Yeah.
It's a pretty complex place.
Exactly. We were talking about SAP sales and distribution, or SD, which is, the heartbeat of how companies actually sell things. But specifically, we are looking at what we're calling the Senior Consultant's Playbook.
Right.
We have this incredible source material, and it's essentially a preparation guide for someone with, I don't know, about 8 to 10 years of experience under their belt.
Yeah, this isn't for beginners. This is for the person who doesn't just know which buttons to click, but really understands the architecture, the why behind those buttons.
And crucially, how to fix things when the system literally crashes and, the CEO is screaming down the phone.
That's the one. It's a fascinating document because it really draws a sharp line between a junior consultant, someone who might just be following a script or a configuration guide, and a senior architect.
The person who has to make the high-stakes decisions.
For sure. It covers, the deep technical logic, the massive migration to S/4HANA that basically everyone is dealing with right now, crisis management, and even the psychology of handling really difficult clients.
And what I love about this is that it frames the role of a senior consultant almost like a high-stakes mechanic for a jumbo jet while it's in mid-flight.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Can't just turn it off and on again.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to decode what separates that junior button pusher from the senior architect. We're going to look at these really complex customizations, database performance, and the ghosts in the machine that cause these bizarre data inconsistencies.
That separation, it often comes down to one thing, really. Decision-making.
Yeah.
It's not just about knowing how to change the system. It's about knowing if you should change the system. It's all about the hierarchy of choice.
That leads us perfectly into our first big topic then, the hierarchy of decision-making. The source material outlines this core dilemma that I guess every senior consultant faces. It's that eternal battle between code versus configuration.
Right. This is the classic struggle. It happens on every project. You have a client who says, I want the system to do X.
Right.
Now, you can probably make the system do X in like a dozen different ways. But the senior consultant knows that some of those ways are just ticking time bombs.
Okay.
A junior consultant sees a requirement and thinks, oh, easy. I'll just get a developer to write a quick script. But a senior consultant is thinking, how is this going to look in 5 years during a major upgrade?
So let's walk through this hierarchy. The source material presents a very specific, almost a sacred order of operations. What is the absolute first choice?
First choice, always, no question, is standard configuration. This is the stuff that SAP built out of the box.
The vanilla system.
Exactly. It's supported, it's safe for upgrades, and it doesn't require a developer to write a single line of code. If you can solve a business problem with standard config, you win. It's robust because, thousands of other companies are essentially testing it for you every single day.
Okay, but let's be real. Standard config doesn't always cut it, does it?
Well,
I mean, clients have some really weird specific requirements. So what's step 2?
Step 2 is personalization, or what we call variance. And this is often overlooked, and honestly, it's a tragic underutilization of the system sometimes.
How so?
Well, let's say a client wants to hide a field on a screen because it just confuses their users. Maybe the tax classification field is totally irrelevant for their specific sales team. A junior consultant might immediately think, we need a developer to change the screen code.
Which is expensive and risky, right? Because
Yeah.
you're modifying a standard object.
Exactly. A senior consultant uses the screen variant, that's transaction SHD0, to just hide the field configurationally. You create a variant, you assign it to the user group, and boom, the field is gone.
So no code, no mess.
And when you upgrade SAP down the line, that variant just stays valid. It's clean.
I love that. Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
But okay, eventually you run out of standard options. You can't just
Yeah.
hide fields forever. Then we get into the coding territory. But even here, the source material lists a specific preference.
We do. And the third choice, and usually the preferred technical route these days, is something called BATES. That's business add-ins.
Right.
You can think of these as hooks that SAP provides in the code. They're like designated parking spots for your custom logic.
All parking spot. I like that. So you're not modifying the core SAP code.
No, you're not touching it. Your code just sits neatly alongside it. They are clean, they have very defined interfaces, and they are generally upgrade stable, which is the holy grail.
But the source material, it spends a lot of time on the next level down.
Yeah.
The place you go when betas aren't enough or maybe not available. It seems to be a bit more old school, but still necessary. The user exit. And specifically this legend called MV45AFZZ.
Yes. The user exit. And in the sales and distribution world, MV45AFCZ is basically famous, or, depending on your experience, infamous.
That sounds like a license plate or some kind of secret password. Why is this specific string of letters so important?
It's the kitchen sink of sales and distribution customization. You have to understand a bit of the architecture here. MV45AFZZ is what's called an include program. It's a piece of code that SAP technically owns, but they've left certain sections of it blank.
Intentionally blank.
Yes. They're essentially saying, okay, look, if you really, really need to mess with the standard logic during a sales order save, do it here. This is your spot.
So it's a designated graffiti wall.
A structural graffiti wall, yes. That's a good way to put it. And the specific form routine inside it, use exits of document prepare. That's the critical one.
Let's unpack that name.
Yeah.
Save document prepare. What is happening technically at that exact moment?
Okay, so this is your last very specific chance to intervene before the system commits all the data to the database tables.
The point of no return.
Almost. When you hit save on a sales order, the system doesn't just write to the hard drive immediately. It gathers all the data from the screen, from memory, and it holds it in what we call internal tables. Specifically for sales orders, XVBAP for the item data and XVBPA for the partner data.
Okay, hold on. Internal tables. For the listener visualizing this isn't the actual database yet, is it? We're not talking about permanent storage.
Correct. Think of it like a draft email. It's all just sitting there in your computer's RAM. It hasn't been sent. It hasn't been written to the server. It's just floating in the application's memory for a moment.
Okay.
And MV45AFZZ lets you look at that draft, check it, maybe even change it, or just rip it up completely before it gets mailed.
The source gives a really vivid real-world example of this to explain why on earth you would ever need to go this deep. The scenario is a client needs a mandatory check during a sales order creation. That's transaction VA01.
Right. And the requirement is very specific, they say. If the material group is electronics, then you must have a specific technical contact listed in the partner functions.
And if that person isn't listed,
you cannot save the order. The system has to stop you.
Now, a logical question from the listener might be, why can't you just use the standard incompletion log? I mean, isn't that the tool designed to make fields mandatory?
It is, and that's a great question. That's what a senior consultant would ask first. The problem here is the conditional logic.
The if.
The if, exactly. Standard incompletion logs are usually global or tied to, say, an item category. They aren't really smart enough to say only enforce this rule if the material group is electronics and the sales org is 1,000. To try and do that with standard config would require a massive, really complex setup involving new item categories, new determination rules. It would be using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
So the standard tool is too blunt an instrument. You need a scalpel. You need MV45AFZZ.
Exactly. So the senior consultant goes to the user exits of document prepare form. This runs right before the database commit. But here's the trap. The source material warns about something called a looping disaster.
A looping disaster. That sounds ominous.
It is, because to check the material group, you have to look at every single line item in the sales order, right?
Right. Makes sense.
So you write a loop over the internal table, XVBP, but then inside that loop, you have to check if the partner exists. So you have to read the other internal table, XVBPA.
So you have a loop. Inside a loop.
Potentially. If you aren't careful, you're nesting loops. Now, imagine a small order with 5 items, no problem. But what if it's an order with 500 line items?
Oh.
If you write bad code-like looping through the entire partner table for every single one of those 500 items without using an optimized read like a binary search or a key, you are creating a massive performance spike.
So the user hits save.
And the screen just freezes for 10, maybe 20 seconds while the system just churns and churns through hundreds of thousands of iterations.
And the user thinks the system is broken. They're calling the help desk.
Precisely. A junior consultant writes code that works for an order with 1 line item in the test system. A senior consultant writes code using read table with key and optimized logic that works for an order with 1,000 line items in the production system.
It's the difference between it works and it scales.
That's it. That is the crucial distinction.
That's a fantastic point. It really handles the decision of how to build things properly from the start. But then comes the nightmare scenario. The system is built, it's running, and suddenly it stops. And that brings us to section 2, performance tuning and the timeout nightmare.
This is where the real panic sets in. The source describes a very common symptom, a timeout or a runtime error. Usually this happens during high-volume tasks, like running the billing due list transaction VFO4.
For those not in the weeds, VFO4 is basically the make money button for a company, isn't it? It processes all the deliveries and turns them into invoices.
That's a perfect way to put it. It scans the entire database for everything that needs to be billed and processes it in a big batch. If VFO4 crashes, invoices don't go out.
And if invoices don't go out?
Cash doesn't come in. The CFO calls the CIO and the CIO calls you. It is a critical stop the business kind of failure.
So the system times out. It just spins and spins until it dies. How does the senior consultant analyze this? I imagine the first instinct is probably to just ask for more server memory or something.
Which is rarely the real solution. It's usually a temporary band-aid. No, you have to play detective. The first rule, always, is replication.
Okay.
You never, ever try to debug this in the live production system if you can possibly help it. You go to the quality system, the QAS system, and you try to reproduce the error with a similar volume of data.
And once you can reproduce it, what tools do you use? The source material mentions STO5. What is that?
STO5 is the SQL trace. Think of it as a wiretap on the database. It records every single conversation happening between the application code and the database itself.
Every request.
Every single one. You turn it on, you run the failing transaction, you turn it off, and then you look at the log. And what you are looking for, 90% of the time, is the sequential read.
Sequential read. That sounds benign, but in database terms, it's a killer. Why?
Imagine you need to find a phone number for John Smith, but instead of using the alphabetical index in the phone book, you start at page 1 and read every single name, one by one, until you finally find him. That's the sequential read.
That takes a very long time.
A very long time. Now imagine you have to do that for 500 different people. If you do that on a table like VBAP, the sales order items table, which might have 50 million rows, the system will just hang.
Because it's ignoring the index.
It's ignoring the table of contents. It's just scanning the entire hard drive platter from start to finish. It's the most inefficient way to find data.
And there's another tool mentioned in the source, SE30 or SAT. How's that different?
Right. So while ST05 looks at the database communication, SE30, or its newer version SET, analyzes the runtime of the ABAP code itself.
So the application side.
Exactly. It tells you, is the lag coming from the database fetching data, which ST05 would show, or is it the ABAP code doing some crazy inefficient calculation logic? It helps you isolate the bottleneck. Is it the kitchen or the waiter?
I like that. The source gives a specific sequential read trap scenario involving the sales order history table, VBFA. Can you walk us through that one?
Oh, this is a classic rookie mistake. The scenario involves a custom routine, maybe in a report or an interface, something checking if an order has been delivered. The code was selecting data from VBFA using a field that wasn't indexed.
Like what?
Like a customer reference field, for example. And worse, it was doing a select inside a loop.
Select means select all, right? Give me every column.
Yes, it means give me every single column in this database row. Imagine you are moving house. You want to find your toothbrush. A specific select says go to the box labeled bathroom, get the toothbrush. A select says bring me every single box from the moving truck, unpack them all in the living room, and then I'll decide what I need.
That is inefficient on a massive scale.
It clogs the network. It clogs the application's memory. And doing that inside a loop means you are asking for the whole house to be delivered over and over again for every single item you're processing. It just kills the database.
So what's the fix? How does the senior consultant rewrite this mess?
2 main things. First, strict column selection. Only ask for the toothbrush. If you only need the document number and the date, only select those 2 fields.
And the second?
Use for all entries.
For all entries. That sounds like a command. What does it actually do under the hood?
It's a bundling mechanism. Instead of this constant ping-ponging back and forth to the database, hey, give me data for order A, then, okay, now give me data for order B, then, okay, now for C, you bundle all your requests into one big packet.
Okay.
You say, here's a list of 50 order numbers, go find the data for all of them and send it back to me all at once.
So it massively reduces the chatter.
Drastically. It can turn 50 round trips to the database into one single trip. It's probably the single most effective performance tune-up technique in the ABAP language.
And there's a senior tip about indexing. What was that about?
Yes. So let's say the code is optimized. You're using for all entries, but it's still slow because you are forced to search by a weird field like that customer reference field we mentioned.
Yeah.
You might need to create a secondary index on the database table. That's like adding a new index to the back of the phone book that's organized by phone number instead of by name. It lets the database find things quickly using that alternate field.
You can't just do that on your own, can you?
Oh, no. You need the basis team's approval for that. Because creating an index takes up storage space and it actually slows down write speeds a tiny bit because the index has to be updated every time you add a new record. It's a trade-off, a performance tuning trade-off.
Right, so we've built it, we've tuned it, but now disaster strikes in a live system, and we are moving to Section 3, Crisis Management Firefighting in Production.
This is the high-stress zone. This is where, careers are made or sometimes lost.
The source lays down a golden rule right off the bat.
Yeah.
Direct changes in production are prohibited. Full stop.
Absolutely. This is Audit Compliance 101. In any publicly traded company that's SOX compliant, Sarbanes-Oxley, if you change code directly in production, you might as well just hand in your resignation on the way out.
Why is it so strict?
It completely breaks the audit trail. You are essentially tampering with the financial records machinery with no oversight. Plus, the practical risk is huge. If you make a simple syntax error in your code in production, you could crash the entire global system instantly. There is no safety net. It's like performing surgery without washing your hands.
If there are exceptions, right, there have to be exceptions.
Oh, it's right.
The business cannot just stop. What is acceptable to change directly in production?
Very, very specific things. Master data, for one.
Yeah.
You have to be able to create new customers or update pricing, which are condition records. That's just normal business operation.
Okay, that makes sense. And what else?
Number ranges.
Number ranges. That sounds really administrative, almost trivial.
It is, until it isn't. Imagine your billing documents are numbered from 1 to 1000. If you hit invoice number 1000 on a busy Tuesday afternoon, the system cannot create invoice 1001. It stops.
The whole billing process just halts.
The entire process halts. Nobody in the company can create an invoice. The trucks can't leave the warehouse. The business literally grinds to a halt.
You can't wait for a formal transport from development for that.
No, you have to get approval, go into transaction SNRO in the production system, and extend that range immediately. It's one of the very few times a functional consultant is allowed to touch the live config.
That makes a lot of sense. But the never-ever list is pretty strict regarding ABA code.
Yeah.
So if there is a critical bug like that pricing error we talked about, how do you fix it if you can't touch production?
You follow the firefighter process, you fix the bug in the development system, you create a transport, you move it to the quality system, you get the business to test it and sign off.
Right.
And then you use a special emergency transport process to move it into production.
And this often requires a firefighter ID. Right. That sounds cool.
It does sound cool. It's a special user ID that has elevated privileges, allowing you to do things normal users can't. But here's the catch. It tracks every single keystroke you make, every transaction you run, every change you make.
All logged.
When you log out, a detailed log is automatically sent to the internal audit team. They review everything you did to ensure you didn't just transfer $1 million to your own bank account while you were in there fixing the bug.
It's like breaking the glass to get the fire axe, but there's a camera watching you the whole time.
That's exactly what it is.
Now, speaking of nightmares, the source brings up data inconsistency, the ghost in the machine. This sounded terrifying to me. It describes a scenario where a sales order header says the order is open, but all the items on it say completed.
This happens. It's rare, but it happens. Maybe the server blinked during a save. Maybe one of your user exits crashed halfway through processing. So the header table, VBAK, thinks the order is still open, but the item table, VBAP, thinks everything is done.
So what happens to that order?
It just sits there in limbo. It's stuck. It won't show up on the billing due list. You can't close it, and it messes up all your sales reports. It's a zombie document.
The temptation, the dangerous temptation, must be to just go into the database table and write a quick SQL update script, Right.
Yeah.
Just force that header status to completed.
And that is the cardinal sin of a support consultant. Never, ever use direct SQL UPdate scripts on standard SAP tables. You risk creating what we call a Franken document.
A Franken document.
Yes, because if you just change the header status, but you forget to update the corresponding entry in the document flow table or the status index table or the credit commitment table, you have fundamentally corrupted the data integrity of that document. The system will start behaving in really unpredictable ways later on.
So what is the safe senior level solution?
You use the standard correction reports that SAP provides for this very reason. The sourceless one called RV-Delsta. This is a report that looks at the documents. It recalculates the correct status based on the actual document flow and the item data, and it fixes the inconsistencies safely.
So SAP knows this happens and they provide the tools.
Yes. There's another one, SDVBUK00, to regenerate the status index tables. These are tools SAP wrote to clean up their own occasional mess. The key is you have to know they exist and use them. And always, always run them in test mode first to see what they propose to do before you let them change anything.
It's about respecting the integrity of the system. You don't perform surgery with a chainsaw. You use the tools that were designed for the job.
Exactly, 100%.
Now, we are going to shift gears pretty significantly here. We've been talking about the legacy world, effectively, the old ECC system. But the entire SAP ecosystem is moving, or in many cases has already moved, to S/4HANA. So Section 4 is the Great Migration.
This is the biggest topic in the SAP world right now, and probably for the next 5 years. Moving from the old ECC system to the modern S/4HANA architecture. And it's not just an upgrade, it's more like a demolition and a complete reconstruction.
And the source highlights some absolutely massive changes.
Yeah.
Let's start with one that seems to cause a lot of pain: rebates. In the old days, we had this thing called Table VBOX.
Ugh, VBOX, the bane of every SAP administrator's existence. In the old system, every time you created a billing document, the system had to go and update this one massive index table, VBOX, to track potential rebates.
So it was constantly being written to.
Constantly, and it grew exponentially. If you had 10 years of business history, VBOX could be terabytes in size. It was huge, it was slow, and it caused massive locking issues and lag during billing runs.
And in the S/4HANA, what happens to VBOX?
It's gone. Completely deleted from the database, vaporized.
Yeah.
S/4HANA uses a new concept called settlement management. Because the underlying HANA database is so incredibly fast, it doesn't need a pre-calculated aggregated index table like VBOX anymore. It can just read directly from the live transactional data, the invoices, on the fly.
But this creates a huge migration headache, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You can't just copy the old VBOX data over to the new system.
No, because there's nowhere to put it. The table doesn't exist. You cannot migrate old rebate agreements directly to the new system. It's a hard stop.
So what do you do with them?
You have to close them all out in the old ECC system.
Yeah.
You have to run final settlements, pay the customers what they're owed, and then after you go live on S4, you recreate them from scratch as new condition contracts. It requires a massive amount of coordination with the business.
Wow. Okay, another massive change, and perhaps the most confusing one for people, is the business partner revolution. The source says customers and vendors are gone. What does that mean?
That's a bit of a shock to the system for old school consultants. For decades, we used to have transaction XD01 for customers and XK01 for vendors.
Right.
They were totally separate master data files. So you could have customer 1000, which was Walmart, and you could also have vendor 1000, which was, say, a local cleaning service. They had the same ID number, but they lived in different tables, so the system didn't care. They were separate entities.
But S/4HANA merges them.
Yes. Everyone is now a business partner or a BP. And here's a logic trap. A business partner ID must be unique across the entire system. You cannot have two BPs with the number 1000.
So if you have customer 1000 and vendor 1000 in your old system, and you try to migrate them to S4.
Collision.
Yeah.
The migration tool, the CVI cockpit, will just scream at you and fail. It will say, error, business partner 1000 already exists, and your migration stops dead.
This sounds like a logical impossibility. How do you possibly fix that? The source details a specific strategy.
You have to decide who wins the number. And usually you want to keep your customer numbers the same. The salespeople, the customer service reps, they know them by heart. Oh yeah, customer 1000 is Walmart. You don't want to change that.
Okay, so the customer number stays. What about the vendor?
So before the migration, you actually have to go into your legacy ECC system and renumber the vendors that have a conflict.
You change the historical data. in the old system.
You have to. You run a project to change the cleaning service from vendor 1,000 to, say, vendor 50,000. You have to update all the historical purchase orders, the bank details, everything. It's a huge undertaking.
That sounds like a massive data cleansing project in itself.
It is. It's a strategic data project that has to happen months, sometimes a year, before the technical switch to S/4HANA. If you don't do it, your S/4 conversion project will crash on day one. Guaranteed.
That is true strategic senior level planning right there. Now, the last part of this migration section talks about data model simplification. We mentioned VBOX is gone. What else gets deleted?
The status tables, VBUK for headers and VBUP for items. These used to hold the status of every single sales order and delivery. Is it open, partially shipped, fully invoiced?
Okay, so where did that information go?
Now, those status fields have been moved directly onto the header and item tables themselves. So the overall status field is now physically on VBAK, the sales order header table. This makes reporting much faster because you don't have to do as many database joins to get a complete picture.
But there's always a but. What's the catch?
But think about all that custom code you wrote 10 years ago. All your custom reports, your interfaces, your user exits, they all have lines that say select from VBUK or select from VBUP.
And now VBUK and VBUP are gone.
So the moment you go live on S4, all that code crashes immediately. It's called a dump in SAP terms. The program tries to read from a table that no longer exists. It's looking for a ghost.
So a big part of the senior consultant's job in an S4 project is scanning all that custom code before the migration.
Absolutely. You run tools like the Code Inspector or the ATC, which is the ABIP Test Cockpit. It scans every single line of custom code in your entire system, and it flags every reference to an obsolete dead table. Then you have to go in and manually rewrite that code to point to the new location of the data.
It's like an archaeological dig where you have to update the map as you go. Wow. Now, tied closely to this S4 HO shift is Section 5, the new era of credit management, or FSCM.
This is one of the biggest functional changes for the business. We moved from what we call classic SD credit, which was, very tightly coupled and lived effectively inside the sales and distribution module, to FSCM,
Which stands for?
Financial Supply Chain Management. And it's decoupled. It sits more on the finance side of the house now, which makes a lot more sense.
And the brain of this new system is something called BRF plus Phi.
Business Rule Framework Plus. This is a complete game changer. In the old days, credit logic was just a bunch of static configuration tables. It was pretty rigid.
Right.
Now the logic is built in a graphical formula workbench. It's almost like using Excel formulas on steroids.
Yeah.
You can build these complex, nested logical trees without writing a single line of ABI code.
The source gives a real-world application of this that I thought was absolutely brilliant, the seasonal credit check.
Yes, this is a perfect example. Imagine a retail client. They do maybe 50% of their entire year's business in October, November, and December for the holidays.
Sure.
In the old system, the credit manager would have to manually go into thousands of customer master records and raise their credit limits for the fourth quarter, and then remember to lower them all again in January.
A total nightmare of manual work.
Yeah.
And so prone to error.
A complete waste of time and energy. With BRF plus A, the senior consultant builds a rule. The rule says something like, if the current month is October, November, or December, and the customer's industry is retail, then automatically boosts the calculated credit limit by 20%.
And the system just does it.
Right.
No human intervention.
The system evaluates that formula every single time the credit check runs. No manual maintenance. The limit adjusts itself dynamically based on the rules you defined. That is the power of BRF plus A. It turns the consultant from a table filler into a true rule architect.
However, with great power comes the available limit trap. The source describes this mystery. A customer has a $10,000 credit limit. They've only used $2,000, so they should have $8,000 free. But the system blocks their new sales order. Why?
This stumps people all the time. They look at the limit and say the math doesn't add up. The answer almost always lies in the check rule that's been configured. It's not just about the overall limit. It's often about the oldest open item check.
The deadbeat check.
Exactly. The logic is basically, I don't care if you have $8,000 of credit available with me. You have one single invoice for $50 that is more than 90 days overdue. Until you pay that old invoice, you get nothing new.
It prevents bad debt from just piling up and getting worse.
Right. But to debug this, you can't just look at the credit limit. You have to go into the system and check the documented credit decision, the DCD log, or even debug the underlying function module, UKM check credit. You have to see which specific rule in BRF Plus triggered the block.
And You need to know your tables, right? We talked about VBAK earlier. What are the new credit tables in this FSCM world that a senior person must know?
If you are an old school consultant and you're looking for credit data in Table K and KK, you are looking in a graveyard. It's empty in S4.
Good to know.
You need to know UKM totals. That's the main summary table holding the credit limit and the total usage. And you need to know UKM item, which holds every single line item, every open order, every open delivery, every open invoice that contributes to that credit exposure. Knowing UKM totals is the new K and KK.
That is a crucial, crucial distinction. Okay, we have covered the technical, the crisis, the migration. Now let's talk about the human element. Section 6, surviving the interview and client interaction.
This is where the rubber really meets the road. You can know all the T codes in the world, but can you handle the pressure of a client workshop or a tough interview?
The source material is essentially a guide to passing a senior-level interview. It talks about detecting fakes. How do interviewers spot someone who claims to have 8 years of experience, but really only has 1 year of experience repeated 8 times?
The single biggest red flag is a lack of integration knowledge. A junior consultant knows SD. They know how to create a sales order. A senior consultant knows how that sales order impacts finance, FI, and materials management.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If I ask a candidate, can you explain how a post-goods issue, a PGI, updates the general ledger, and the candidate says, I don't know, the FI consultant handles that, they failed the interview.
Why is that a failing answer?
Because the PGI is the moment that value physically and financially leaves your company. A senior SD consultant must know that it links the movement type, usually 601, to the valuation class on the material master, which then goes to the automatic account determination in transaction OBYC, which determines the specific cost of goods sold GL account and the inventory GL account. You have to know the entire chain. You can't operate in a silo.
The source also lists some wonderfully vicious trick questions. I want to throw these at you. Let's treat this like a little game show. I'll ask the question, you give me the senior answer versus what a junior might say.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
Okay, question 1. Can you delete a delivery document that has already been PGI'd?
The junior consultant says, sure, you just go to transaction VL02N and hit the little trash can icon.
And the buzzer sounds. Makes buzzer noise. Wrong answer.
Because the system will stop you immediately. Post-goods issue means the inventory has physically left the building. The financial GL has been updated. You cannot just delete financial history. The senior answer is what we call the unwind.
The unwind.
First, you check for a billing document. If it exists, you must cancel it first with VF11. Then you go and reverse the goods issue with transaction VL09. That puts the stock back in the warehouse logically. Then and only then does the delivery status open up to allow you to delete it. It's a 3-step waltz.
Very good. Very thorough. Question 2. Where is the pick quantity stored in the database?
The LIPS trap. Everyone knows LIPS is the delivery item table. The junior consultant will confidently say LIPS LFIMG.
That sounds correct. LFIMG is delivery quantity.
It sounds correct, but it's wrong. LFIMG is the delivery quantity. If I order 10, and you decide to deliver 10, that field says 10. But the pick quantity, the amount the guy in the warehouse actually grabbed off the shelf and put in the bin, is stored in a different field. LIPS PIKMG.
And why does that tiny distinction matter so much?
Because if you are writing a report on warehouse picking performance, or if you have a discrepancy where you picked 12 but only shipped 10, you need PIKMG. If you use the wrong field, your data is garbage and your report is useless.
I feel like I'm watching a wizard duel. Okay, last one. Can you change the sold to party on a saved sales order?
The answer is generally no, and you have to explain why. The salty party determines everything: the pricing, the tax jurisdiction, the sales area, the available shipping points. If you were to change it, the entire logical structure of the document would collapse.
So what's the procedure?
The system usually grays that field out once you hit save for this very reason. The correct procedure is typically to cancel or reject the existing order and recreate it for the correct customer.
Brutal, but useful. Now, beyond this technical quiz, there's the soft skills aspect. The source talks about the T formation answer. What is that?
This is for that classic interview question. Tell me about your last project. If you only say, we did this, we did that, we went live, you sound like a passenger who was just along for the ride. If you say, I did everything, you sound like an arrogant liar.
So the T formation balances it.
Exactly. The top bar of the T is the we. the team context. The vertical bar is the I, your specific contribution.
So how does that sound in practice?
It sounds like the team was responsible for the full European rollout, that's the we, but I specifically owned the entire pricing configuration from scratch, and I wrote all the functional specifications for the custom rebate logic, that's the I. It shows you can work effectively in a team, but you also own your specific domain with expertise.
Specific ownership within a team context. I like that a lot. Finally, there's a great anecdote in the source about the penny difference. This is a story about a zero 0.01 currency difference between the sales order total and the billing document total.
Oh, this is the kind of thing that drives corporate accountants absolutely crazy. The sales order was calculating tax line by line and then summing up the tax amounts. The billing document, by default, was summing all the net values of the lines first and then applying the tax percentage to the total sum.
And because of rounding, that can be different.
Mathematically, these two methods can result in a 1-cent rounding difference, and when your systems don't match, you fail your audit.
And the fix wasn't a simple config change.
No, this is deep. It required implementing a specific condition formula, number 17, in the pricing procedures copy control. This formula basically forces the billing document to abandon its own calculation method and strictly respect the rounding logic and final value of the original sales order.
Yeah, it is a tiny, tiny detail.
It's a tiny detail, but a senior consultant knows that for a client processing millions of orders a year, those pennies add up to a compliance and reconciliation nightmare.
It really highlights the level of precision that's required. You are dealing with the company's money, effectively.
You are dealing with the company's lifeblood, absolutely.
So we've covered a massive amount of ground today. I mean, from MV45 AFCZ loops to the available limit trap and the entire great migration to S/4HANA. As we wrap up this deep dive, what is the core takeaway for our listener? What's the one thing they should remember?
The main takeaway is that being a senior consultant isn't about memorizing T-codes. Although, as we've seen, having a cheat sheet of things like VOFM, VOV8, and VTFL definitely helps.
Right.
It's about understanding integration.
Integrate.
The system doesn't exist in a vacuum. Every single choice you make, whether it's using a user exit instead of a BEI or how you configure a credit check, has a downstream impact on the database, on the finance team, on the warehouse guys, on the company's bottom line. The true expert is the one who sees the ripple effect before the stone even hits the water.
I love that image, seeing the ripple effect.
And here is a final thought for people to chew on. We talked a lot about S/4HANA and automation and BRF Plus Swish, but as AI and machine learning start getting truly integrated into the core of SAP predicting delivery delays before they happen, automating credit risk decisions even further, the role of the consultant is going to shift again.
How so?
We won't just be configuring rules anymore. We'll be training the system to make its own rules. We'll be the ones curating the data sets and validating the models. That is the next frontier for the true senior architect.
Training the system to make its own rules. That is equal parts exciting and terrifying.
It's what keeps us employed.
That it does. Thank you so much for guiding us through the engine room today. This was fascinating.
My pleasure. It was fun.
And thank you to our listeners. Keep diving deep, and we'll see you on the next one.